Okay, in this lesson I'm going to show you guys how to handle text in InDesign. Just some of the best practices and tools you can use in InDesign to get yourself started. So I'm going to create a new document and I'm just going to use a letter. Okay. Zoom out. And it gave me, let's go to edit. Oops, file, document setup. And I'm going to switch the orientation, and I do not want facing pages, so I hit OK. So now you can see it has one page, and I'll change my master to one page. Alright, that's what I want. So, let's start with the basic text box. Several ways you can add text. So, one, you can use the text tool and click and drag to make a box. Then you can just begin typing, or common practice for typographers is to use lorem ipsum, which is just basically gibberish that is used as a placeholder for text. You can find this online at, let's see if we can, at www.lipsum.com. That's a great place. You just kind of type in how many paragraphs, words you need, and hit generate, and then it'll give you a list, which is what I'm using for this exercise. So I'm just going to grab this, and I'm going to paste it in there. Okay, so great thing about this is that you can, once you have the text in there, you can move it all you want. If you need to fine tune it a little bit more, if you click and hold on it for a second, oops, let's do it here. Click and hold, it'll automatically move as you're resizing it. If you just quickly click and drag it, it won't adjust until you let go. But if you hold it for a second, then you can move it around, right? So I use the text tool there. You can also just create a box and then click the text tool on the box and paste it. That's another way to do it. You could also draw a custom shape box, which I do not recommend you do at this point. This is obviously not a good shape for text. But once I draw a shape, I can always take the text tool, click on it, and paste the text in. So that is the basic idea. You can also, I guess there's one more. If you go down to the box, you can create ellipses or any other polygons, and again, click the type tool and paste it. So that is some of the basic ways you can create a text box. To create columns, let's say we'll need some more text, so let's just grab all of this. Paste it in here. So it's obviously a lot of text. It's far too wide to be of any use, so I'm going to hit Control B. And from here, I can create columns. I can, let's say, 2 columns. And that'll automatically create columns, and now when I click and drag it, those columns will stay. I can always hit Control B and go back and change the number of columns. It'll automatically from the bottom continue to the next one. You can change the gutter, which is going to be the space between. I wouldn't worry about that right now. Another thing that's handy is you can balance the columns. So if you want them always to be the same size or relatively the same size, you can have that clicked. So when you resize it, it will automatically try to balance the text. So I'm gonna, oops, keep that and turn that down. Let's go back to 0 or 1. Another thing you can do is, let's say you have 2 different size columns. So let's say I have this text down here, but I want it to continue in this other custom shaped column up here. Let's make it. Let's just say I want it to continue down here. So what I could do, see this little red box right here? If I click on it, you see that it tags a bunch of text on it. And I just click it on the next box. So now it will continue from this first one to the second one. And let's say there's still a lot of text, so let's say I need to add another column down the road. I can do the same thing, click the red box. Oops. I click it here, so then it'll keep continuing through. Then from there, sky's the limit. I can just go back in, change these columns the way I want to. As a general rule, I wouldn't recommend having a bunch of different column sizes, but I'm just kind of showing you what it can do. So that's kind of how you can play with columns and link them together. So the next thing we'll look at is kind of how to change the properties of text. Something you're probably familiar with, just kind of using Microsoft Word and whatnot. So let's just kind of zoom in here. So you can change the properties of the entire column just by having it selected and going to character and selecting a different font. Let's go to good old Adobe Garamond, and that will change everything. You can also select a piece of type and change the properties of it. Say I wanted to have this stand out, so I'm going to bump that up to 18, go to bold. So you can change individual pieces just by having it selected and changing the character properties. Let's go through the different things on the character panel here. Let's actually set this all back to basic here. As a general rule, for your body text, I wouldn't go anywhere. I'd stay within 7 to 9. 12 is considered a display size, meaning like headings. So keep your basic type between 7 and 9. It really depends on the type. So let's say change to universe, and let's make that 8. I'm gonna zoom in. If I change this to something like, let's go to Mrs. Eves, you can see that the X height, which is the height of the lowercase letters, is a lot smaller. So let's go back. So you can see that it's quite a bit smaller. So this font you actually need to make a little bit larger to be readable. So it kind of depends on the typeface, and I'll guide you through this through our critiques. But again, kind of try and keep it between 7 and 9. Second property here is the leading, which is going to be the space between your lines of text. They call it leading because back in the old days they usually actually put a piece of lead between the pieces of type that they had in the ink press. But for that, you kind of have to size it out. The wider the columns, the more space there should be. Let's see, you never want to go more than 80 characters in a line, which you can do by selecting a row of type and going to info, and it'll tell you how many characters. So that's a little bit wide. So to try to keep the amount of characters between 20 and 80, I would say. 90 is okay. Say 20 and 90. So that's, basically where you want to stick to. In terms of what a good leading is, it again depends on the type, the typeface that you're using. You don't want too much, but you want enough that it's easily, the different lines are distinguishable enough that you can read comfortably. And this is another thing I completely forgot to mention. This down here, always keep to optical. It doesn't really matter why, but it basically optimizes the way it looks in terms of reading the text. So keep that to optical. The next setting is tracking, which changes the space between letters. Again, this is dependent on the typeface. Typically, sans serif fonts need more tracking, and serif fonts need less. This is because serif fonts have more distinguishing features than sans serif fonts. So that kind of covers what you're going to need to know for character, what you need to know from the character panel. Don't really worry about anything down here. This squashes and stretches the type, which you never want to do because typefaces are designed to be read, most easily read as they are. So if you stretch and squash them, it kind of destroys all the hard work that the typographer went into in designing it. So don't really need to worry about it or anything else. Moving on, let's go to paragraph. Paragraph here, there's not a whole lot to know. You can change your justification, which is either left, center, or right. You want to stick to left for large pieces of, or large bodies of text. The reason being is that it's very clear where the lines start and stop. If you keep it to center or right, it's a little harder to find where one line ends and the next one begins. And you want the body text to be as easily read as possible. Your other option is to go to justified, which basically evens out the columns so that you have a straight edge on either side. And what it does is it's as you scale the box, it will fit the type in rather than having what we call a rag on the right hand side. So with that being said, there are some more options when you go into paragraph. If you go under justification, again, when you have this the paragraph set in this manner, this is called justified. You can go into the justification settings under this tab right here, and this is what I would have. I would highly recommend having it set at, which is 80, 100, and 130 for word spacing. For letter spacing, I would go to -3, 0, and 3. What this means is that it gives it a little bit more flexibility on how it sets your type. You want the type to be distributed nicely, otherwise it creates gaps in your text. So let's for example here, I'll make it bad so you can see what it looks like when it's not. So I'm going to turn, as you can see, it hyphenates some of my words. So I'm going to turn hyphenation off. It's my hyphenation panel, and I'm just going to turn it off. So, and let's make this nice and narrow. So as you can see, let's look at this line right here. It creates huge gaps between my letters, but then down here, the gaps is relatively small. You want the gaps between letters to be about the same size as a lowercase I to fit in there. So obviously this isn't going to work. So the way we make it, we help Indesign to make better decisions on how it's setting the type. We go back into let's turn hyphenation on first. And while we're here, this is a pretty good setting for hyphenation. So don't hyphenate anything less than 6 letters. There should be at least 3 letters on each side, and it will only put at most 2 hyphens in a row. And then I would not hyphenate capitalized words or last word. That's just a no-no. So hit OK. Now we'll go back to justification, set that back. Oops. And hit OK. Since you're not doing a lot of custom typesetting, I would also just keep it to Adobe Paragraph Composer. This does a little bit better job of moving the type around. so it just stays nice and clear. So now if I make this column narrow, you can see that everything, at least for the most part, is a lot more even. So that is about it. Oh, of course, if you want to change the color of type. So let's give this a heading up here, and I'll just take that. We'll make this bigger and bolder. Where are you? Let's choose display. Oops, I do not have that one. So, oh, whoops, wrong font. There we go. So, if you want to change the color of text, you can simply highlight it, and then you can see that the fill now has a T there. If I don't have anything selected, like if I just hit one of my swatches, it will just fill that. However, there's a little setting button right here that has a lowercase t, so that if I select the window and hit that, it will just change the color of the text. If I don't do that, it will just fill the background, which looks hideous. So let's not do that. So we'll click on that lowercase t, and that will change the color of the type to whatever I want it to. So that is pretty much it when it comes to at least getting a start on setting text in InDesign. There's a lot more tools there, and if there's something you want to learn how to do, by all means, send me a message and I will point you in the right direction.